Alrighty, y'all. Welcome back to the Complete Husband's Handbook podcast. My name is Daniel, and today we're going to do something slightly different. I've been reading a lot of books here lately about just marriage, self-improvement, things guys wished women knew, things women wished guys knew, talking to friends, talking to family, and all this other stuff. The holidays are kind of over now. Valentine's is coming past, but I was reading a quote from The Little Prince, and I don't know if y'all have ever read this book before. I've seen some of the movie adaptations, and it's never really kind of been my cup of tea. It's just not. I'm a bit of a book snob. Y'all know how I am. If a book can't grasp me by the preface or the introduction and the end of the first chapter, or if it doesn't have that, I'll give it, the first two chapters. If you can't capture me by then, no, I'm sorry. It can be the best thing since sliced bread, and everyone's loved it since Adam walked the earth, but I'm sorry, it's just, some books are just not for me. But this is by a French guy named, and I'm going to probably butcher his name, and to the French or French speakers, I do apologize. It's Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. I think I'm pronouncing that maybe close to being right. But there's a phrase in this book, and the preface says, this little prince comes from outer space, lands on a planet that he's never been to, never heard of, and he has to learn about everything. He has to learn about the animals, the plants, the people, and everything. So he's basically starting from scratch. But in talking about this one particular rose, he calls it his rose. And I'm going to read a quote from it. And it really, really is interesting because he's talking to these other roses. Yeah, it's one of those books. But he's talking to this field of roses. And it starts out, "You are not all like my rose," he said. "As yet you are nothing. No one has tamed you, and you have tamed no one. You are like my fox when I first knew him. He was only a fox, like 100,000 other foxes. But I have made him my friend, and now he is unique in all the world." And then the next part is, "The roses were very much embarrassed." And the prince goes on, You were beautiful, but you were empty. One could not die for you. To be sure, an ordinary passerby would think that my rose looked just like you, the rose that belongs to me. But in herself alone, she is more important than all the hundreds of you other roses, because it is she that I have watered, because it is she that I have put under the glass globe, because it is she that I have sheltered behind the screen, because it is for her that I have killed the caterpillars, except the 2 or 3 that we saved to become butterflies, because it is she that I have listened to when she grumbled, or boasted, or ever sometimes when she said nothing, because she is my rose." And I read that passage and I really thought about how relationships change over time, in particular marriage, and how, looking at a marriage from the outside, whenever we're young, a lot of how we feel about marriage is based on the relationships we see from others. Our own parents, maybe aunts, uncles, older cousins, people from church, school, whatever. And we have this idea of what marriage should be. And then when you get married, you figure out it's not the same. That's one of the reasons I did that previous podcast, Marriage is for the Strong. Because it is for the strong. And I'm going to break down this paragraph where he starts, "You were beautiful, but you were empty." Now, when you're married, you have to realize that whatever gender or sexuality you are, that yes, you'll be attracted to other people. People on television, people walking down the street, people on social media, whatever. And they can be beautiful. I'm mature enough to say, hey, Brad Pitt's a very beautiful man. I'm not gay, but he's a beautiful man. Chris Hemsworth, another beautiful man. Keira Knightley, very beautiful woman. But they're empty in comparison to my wife, my Rose. And then the next part is, one could not die for you. And that part really struck me because of what I've done in the past with my work and my life. And I've had friends die for just weird reasons. Ones that were just young and full of life and just been married, and just what, dying for somebody means. And that just kind of slapped me in the face. Is the person you're with worth dying for? I mean, seriously, think about that. If someone came up to you and put a gun to your head and said, one of you has to die, is that person worth dying for? Not would you die for them. You can be a great person being in a crap relationship, and because of the person you are, yes, I'll sacrifice myself. That's not the question. The question is, are they worth dying for? And that's a whole nother kettle of fish. But it's a really important question. Then he goes on to say, to be sure, an ordinary passerby would think that my Rose looks just like you, the Rose that belongs to me. And my wife and I have been out on the town, shopping, just doing normal life stuff. And if a man passed her on the street, he would go, oh, well, she's just another woman. And that's true to that person, their perspective. Yeah, she's just another woman. But not to me. And that's the mentality you have to have. Your spouse, man, woman, whatever, they can't be like hundreds of other women, because they're not. And we could break it down: biological, genetic, spiritual, mental, emotional, whatever. But in your eyes, your spouse cannot be just one of hundreds, one of thousands. Even in the people you've dated in the past, your spouse cannot be just another relationship. He or she has to be your Rose. And then he goes on to explain that in herself alone, treating the Rose as if it was a living creature that he had more than an emotional relationship with, he had a spiritual one. That she is more important than all the 100 of you other Roses. He's willing to stand there in front of a crowd of, obviously, beings that he spent time around, he's respected, or at least gained their respect, and said, she alone is more important than all of you. Think about the gravity of that statement. But in herself alone, she is more important than all the hundreds of you other Roses. That's powerful. That means something. That's a weighted statement. And then he goes on to say, why? Because it is she I have watered. So he's put effort into this relationship. He knows she needs water. So he's watered her. Because it is she I put under a glass globe. Now what exactly that means, I'm not quite sure. I guess it's a way to protect her, or to single her out, or to show the other Roses or the world, hey, this one's mine. That'd be my guess. I don't know, I'm not French, I don't get the whole glass globe thing. But the next one really hit me, because it is she that I have sheltered behind the screen. Now, if you know anything about gardening, roses are typically very weak flowers. They don't like extreme weather. They don't like too much water, not enough rain. Like they're very fickle. For as beautiful as they are and how graciously they bloom, they are very fickle. So he would have to shelter this rose. So he either built something or brought something to her to protect her. Then the next part is, because it is for her, I have killed the caterpillars. So he's willing to go to war against anything going up against her. And you could take that physically, in a physical sort of protection, whether it's a good place to stay, food, obviously water, protecting her from the elements, which we've seen. But, willing to do that. Except the 2 or 3 we saved to become butterflies. So obviously he spoke to this rose and knew enough about her environment that there were certain caterpillars that would turn to butterflies. So he would kind of move them along. So they planned with each other. She knew what was bad for her. She knew what was okay for her. And she knew what could just be moved along. So he was willing to put into action what she told him and listen to him. And then this next statement, because it is she that I have listened to. Now I can't tell you how many freaking times I've heard from female friends of mine, female family members of mine, even whenever I started to do surveys and stuff, asking people, hey, what would you like men to know? The number one thing was listen, because it is she I have listened to. Not heard, but listened. And then he gives examples of what he listened to. When she grumbled. So when she's having a bad day, she's feeling like crap, work really isn't going the way it needs to be going, just not feeling it, he listened to her. Didn't take it personally, just shut the hell up and listened. Or when she boasted, he celebrated her successes. He didn't try to make them his own. He didn't try to say, oh, but I did this too. No. He sat there and celebrated her successes and boasted along with her, hey, she did this. Or even sometimes when she said nothing. Now, we as men can communicate with no words. A lot of men can see another man, and based on physicality or just, mood in a way, it's that kind of predator to predator feel. We can kind of tell when another guy's just not feeling it. But when women do it, fellas, sometimes your woman just wants you to just be there. Be there in the moment with her. And us men need that too. So both sexes really need to know that the other person, the other partner, spouse, whatever you call yourselves, is there for them. To lean on, to just be. And then he finishes up with, because she is my rose. Now, yes, if you were to break this down like we did, you would see that he spoke to them at first just as a group, and told them straight up, she's more important than the hundreds of you other roses. Then he goes on to testify to what he was willing to do to prove to her that she is important. Then at the end of it, he simply said, because she is my rose. He didn't possess her. He didn't control her. He didn't stop her from being a rose. She's a rose. She's got to be a rose. She's got to do rose things. But she was chosen by him and he by her. And that's really what makes a marriage work. You choose, through the thick and the thin, to be there. Now, how much water he brought over there to water her, I don't know. But there's effort there. He probably sweated. It might have been even a hot day. To put her under a glass globe means he had to go back to his ship and bring it back. More effort. Sheltered behind a screen. Again, was it a hot day? Was it really stormy? He was willing to put himself in harm's way. To kill the caterpillars for her. You know, from what I've gathered here, he's not a mean person. So killing things he may not really want to do. But in defense of her, he was willing to do it. And those are all physical things. He showed her physical affection, showed her physical ways to support her. Then the emotional and mental side of it, he listened. When she grumbled, when she boasted, when she had nothing to say. Then all that really boiled down to, because she is my Rose. So fellas, I want you to really think about that. Really, really, honestly think about that. Is she your Rose? And if you're a lady and you're married to a woman, is she your Rose? Are you her Rose? Or if you're a guy who's married to a guy, same thing. Is he your Rose? And are you his Rose? Because that's really what marriage is about. It's a choice. It's an action. And it's a decision to stay there beyond anything else. To fight the world, to protect each other, and to show each other that kind of commitment. So I hope y'all enjoyed this. I hope I gave y'all something to think about. And I look forward to hanging out with y'all on the next one.